The betrayal didn't start with a shout. It started with a quiet vibration on my uncle's phone in a humid parking lot. The banner read, Parker Core Thread, followed by a command to finalize the language before I saw it. I stood there under the streetlights, 33 years old, realizing that while I had been worrying about being liked, my own flesh and blood had been systematically coordinating exactly how to cut me out. The humidity in Briarhaven always felt heavy, a physical weight that settled on your skin the moment you stepped outside, but that evening it felt particularly oppressive. I sat in my parked sedan for a full 2 minutes before turning off the engine, checking my reflection in the visor mirror. My lipstick was a shade of berry that my Aunt Carol would call aggressive, and my mother would call brave, which were just two different ways of saying I stood out too much for their liking. I was 33 years old. I owned my own home, a renovated bungalow 3 miles from the coast. I ran a successful consultancy firm that specialized in operational efficiency for mid-sized logistics companies. I solved problems for a living. I streamlined chaos. I found the bottlenecks in a system and I cleared them out. Yet, as I stared at the entrance of the Gilded Oyster, the premier waterfront seafood restaurant in our town, I felt like a child who had been sent to the corner for asking too many questions. It was my grandmother Evelyn's 82nd birthday. Attendance was not optional. In the Parker family, absence was treated as an act of war. While presence was treated as an opportunity for inspection, I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of salt water and diesel from the nearby marina, and stepped out of the car. I smoothed down my dress. It was structured, professional, navy blue. I had learned years ago that wearing anything flowery or soft around my relatives only invited them to treat me like something fragile that needed to be managed. Inside, the restaurant was awash of white tablecloths and the dull roar of expensive dining. The Parker table was easy to spot. It was the largest one, positioned near the panoramic window that overlooked the Sound. Commanded by Aunt Carol, she was standing, of course, directing a waiter on how to properly arrange the wine glasses. Carol was the executive director of a nonprofit that helped underprivileged youth, a job she performed with terrifying efficiency and zero actual warmth. She wore cream, as she always did, a color that dared the world to spill something on it. I approached the table, forcing a smile onto my face. "Happy birthday." "Grandma," I said, leaning down to kiss Evelyn's cheek. Her skin was paper-thin and smelled of lavender and old lace. She patted my hand, her eyes cloudy behind her bifocals. "Leah," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "you made it. We were worried you might be too busy with your projects. I am never too busy for you." I said. Carol turned her head, her smile tight. "Hello, Leah. We were just saying how rare it is to see you these days. I suppose the consultant life keeps you on the road. It must be lonely, all that travel. I actually work mostly from my home office now." "Carol," I said, taking the empty seat between my cousin Mara and my uncle Gordon. "It is quite stable." "Stable," Carol repeated, tasting the word as if it were a corked wine. "Well, that is good to hear. We all worry about you. You know, being so independent, it is a lot for one person to carry." I reached for my water glass, noticing the immediate shift in the atmosphere. It was a subtle thing, the kind of microaggression I had spent my entire adult life cataloging. When I sat down, the conversation to my right, between my cousin Ethan and his wife, ceased instantly. Ethan, who worked as a financial advisor and wore suits that were slightly too shiny, picked up his phone and angled the screen toward his chest. Across the table, my mother, Sandra, offered me a nervous, fluttery wave, then immediately looked down at her menu as if the font size had suddenly changed. They were talking about something before I arrived. I knew it. I could feel the static in the air, the residue of a topic that had been hastily swept under the rug the moment I walked within earshot. "Order whatever you like, Leah," Uncle Gordon said, his voice booming a little too loud. He was the jovial peacekeeper of the family, or at least he tried to be. "The fund is covering dinner tonight. The Parker family fund, the golden tether that bound us all together. My grandfather, Silas Parker, had established it 40 years ago. He had been a hard man, a man of steel and shipping containers, but he had wanted his descendants to be safe. The fund was designed to cover education, medical emergencies, and elder care. It was a safety net, not a hammock, he used to say. I noticed Carol shoot Gordon a sharp look. Actually, Carol said smoothly, we are putting this on the personal card tonight. Gordon, no need to bother the administrator with paperwork for a birthday dinner. We need to be mindful of administrative overhead. Gordon looked confused, his brow furrowing. Oh, right. Of course. Mindful. I watched them. I watched the way Ethan tapped his fork against the table, a nervous tic he had had since childhood. I watched the way Mara, who was usually bubbling over with gossip, refused to make eye contact with me, focusing intently on buttering a roll. Everything looks delicious, I said, keeping my voice even. The dinner progressed with the usual agonizing slowness. We talked about the weather. We talked about the humidity. We talked about Evelyn's hydrangeas. Every time I tried to steer the conversation towards something substantial, asking Ethan about his firm, asking Carol about the nonprofit, the answers were clipped, vague. It's all fine, just busy, Ethan said, checking his watch for the third time. Same old, Carol said, waving a hand dismissively. You would not find it interesting. Leah, it is very bureaucratic, not like your consulting. By the time the cake arrived and we sang a disjointed version of Happy Birthday, my jaw ached from the effort of smiling. I felt like a ghost at my own family's table. I was there, but I wasn't seen. Or rather, I was being seen, but only as a threat to be managed. As we walked out into the parking lot, the humid air hit us again, dampening clothes and spirits. The valet stand was backed up, so we stood in a loose cluster under the amber streetlights. Gordon was fumbling with his smartphone. He was a man who still printed out his emails to read them, and technology was his eternal adversary. Blast this thing, he muttered, tapping the screen aggressively. I cannot get the brightness down. It is blinding me. Here, let me help, I said, stepping closer to him. I took the phone from his large, calloused hands. It was an older model, the screen smeared with fingerprints. I swiped down to access the control center. Adjusting the slider. There, I said, is that beta banner notification dropped down from the top of the screen. It was bright green, unmistakable against the dark background of his wallpaper. Parker Core Thread. I froze. The name of the group chat was explicitly clear, but it was the preview text that made the blood drain from my face. Carol finalized language before Leah sees it. Time seemed to stutter. I stared at the words, my brain struggling to process the syntax. Parker Core Thread, a group chat, a thread I was not in. A thread where they were discussing me. Finalize language. Language for what? And why did it need to be done before I saw it? Leah Gordon asked. You got it? My thumb hovered over the notification. For a split second, I considered tapping it. I considered opening the Pandora's box and letting the chaos spill out right there on the asphalt. I could demand to know what language they were finalizing. I could scream, but I was a consultant. I analyzed data. I did not act on incomplete information. I swiped the notification up, dismissing it from the screen, and handed the phone back to him. Yes, I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. I fixed the brightness. You should be good to go. Thanks, kiddo, Gordon said, oblivious. He slid the phone into his pocket, the pocket that contained a conversation about deceiving me. I drove home in silence. No radio, no podcasts, just the hum of the tires on the pavement and the rhythmic thumping of my own heart. When I got into my house, I didn't turn on the lights. I tossed my keys on the counter and sat on my living room floor, leaning back against the sofa. The notification burned in my mind's eye. Finalize language before Leah sees it. I closed my eyes and let the memory of the last 5 years wash over me. I had always attributed the distance to my lifestyle. I was single, child-free, career-focused. They were married, parents, community pillars. I thought we just didn't have much in common, but now, the scenes replayed with a different filter. 2 years ago, the family trip to the Outer Banks. I had found out about it 3 days before they left. Oh, it was so last minute. Sandra had told me, "We didn't think you could get off work." Last Thanksgiving. The time was changed from 2 o'clock to noon, and no one told me until I arrived at 1:30 to find them already serving pie. A miscommunication, Carol had said, laughing lightly. You know how group texts get. Except they didn't have a group text that included me. They had the Parker core thread. I wasn't being paranoid. I wasn't being overly sensitive. I was being managed. I sat there until the sun began to gray the sky in the east. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I was too busy calculating the variables of a betrayal I hadn't even fully uncovered yet. 3 days later, the first piece of paper dropped. It arrived in my email inbox at 10 in the morning on a Tuesday. I was reviewing a supply chain audit for a client in Savannah. Sipping lukewarm coffee. The subject line was stark, "Notice of Trustee Refresh Meeting. Parker Family Fund." I frowned. I clicked it open. The email was from Harrow Crestfield Fiduciary Services. They were the firm that managed the administrative side of the fund. I had received tax documents from them over the years. The standard K-1 forms, but never anything like this. Dear Ms. Parker, this correspondence serves as notification of the upcoming routine trustee refresh meeting, scheduled for the 15th of next month. While beneficiary attendance is not mandatory, the trustees have requested that all documentation regarding beneficiary status be updated prior to this session. Please find attached the preliminary agenda. Sincerely, Harrow Crestfield Administration Team. I read it twice. Routine Trustee Refresh Meeting. I had been a beneficiary of the Parker Family Fund since I was 21. I had never been invited to a meeting. I had never even been told when the meetings were. Why now? And why did the tone feel so cold? I picked up my phone and dialed my mother. She answered on the second ring. Hello, hi. Mom? Oh, Leah. Hi. I was just about to head into a yoga class. Is everything okay? I'm fine, I said, keeping my tone light. I just got an email from Harrow Crestfield about a trustee meeting. There was a pause, a beat of silence that lasted just a second too long. Oh, that. Sandra said, Yes. Carol mentioned they were doing some housekeeping. It is just a formality. Housekeeping, I asked. It says they want to update beneficiary status. What does that mean? And since when do I get invited to these? Sandra let out a sigh, the kind that implied I was being difficult. Leah, honestly, do not make this into a thing. It is just paperwork. The laws change. The tax codes change. They just need to make sure everything is current. You know how banks are. It didn't feel like a bank issue. Mom, it felt specific. You sound stressed, she said, cutting me off. Are you working too much again? You sounded tight at the dinner the other night. 2. You really need to watch your cortisol levels. Leah, stress does terrible things to a woman's complexion. I stared at the phone. She was doing it again, pivoting, making it about my mental state. I am not stressed, I said. I'm just asking a question. Well, don't worry about it, she said firmly. Carol and Ethan are handling it. They just want to make sure the fund is secure for the future, for everyone. Look, I have to go. The instructor is starting. Love you. The line went dead. I sat there, looking at the black screen. Carol and Ethan are handling it. The same Carol and Ethan who were in a group chat finalizing language before I saw it. I needed a second opinion, an unbiased one. I met Jenna Morales for a drink that evening at a wine bar downtown. Jenna and I had gone to high school together. She was a lawyer, sharp as a tack, specializing in corporate contracts. She wasn't a family law attorney. She dealt with mergers, acquisitions, and hostile takeovers. In my current frame of mind, that felt more appropriate. I slid a printout of the email across the high-top table. Jenna took a sip of her Pinot Noir and read it. She didn't skim. She read every word, her eyes narrowing behind her glasses. She set the paper down and tapped it with a manicured fingernail. This is weird, she said. Weird how I asked. The language, Jenna said. Routine trustee refresh. That is not a standard legal term. That is corporate fluff. And this part here, update beneficiary status. You don't update status. You are a beneficiary or you are not. Unless the trust instrument allows for conditional beneficiaries, I don't know. I said, I haven't seen the actual bylaws in years. Jenna looked at me. This does not read like a save the date. Leah, this reads like a pre-litigation covering of bases. They are creating a paper trail that shows they invited you, that they informed you. If they were just changing a tax ID number, they would just send you a form. Inviting you to a meeting implies a vote on something that changes the structure. A vote to kick me out, I asked, voicing the fear that had been gnawing at me since the parking lot. Jenna tilted her head. Can they do that? What do the bylaws say? I don't know. Leah, Jenna said, her voice stern. You are a consultant. If a client told you they didn't know the rules of their own company, what would you tell them? I would tell them to read the contract. I admitted. Exactly. Find the bylaws. Find the original trust deed. Before you walk into that meeting, you need to know exactly what powers they have, because right now, you are walking into a trap blindfolded. I went home and went straight to my office. I had a filing cabinet where I kept my personal documents, but I knew I didn't have the full trust instrument there. I only had the yearly distribution letters. I booted up my desktop computer and logged into my backup drive. I was a digital hoarder. I never deleted anything. Every email, every attachment from the last 10 years was archived. I searched for Parker Fund, hundreds of results. Most were tax forms, but I scrolled back to 2015, back to 2012, back to 2010, the year my grandfather died. I found an email from my grandfather's old personal attorney, a man named Mr. Henderson, who had passed away 5 years ago. The subject line was Parker Family Fund, Overview for Beneficiaries. I opened the attachment. It wasn't the legal deed, but it was a summary document written in plain English, intended to explain the fund to the family. I read my grandfather's words. They weren't written in legalese. They were written in his voice. Stern but caring, the purpose of this fund is to ensure that no Parker is ever left destitute due to illness or calamity, and to ensure that education is never out of reach. All direct descendants of Silas Parker are to be considered equal beneficiaries. I highlighted the words, equal beneficiaries. I scrolled down. The trustees shall serve to execute the will of the beneficiaries, not to rule over them. Transparency is paramount. All major decisions regarding the restructuring of assets or changes to distribution rules require a majority vote of the beneficiaries, not just the trustees. My heart hammered. If that was true, they couldn't change the rules without my vote. Then I saw it. A bullet point near the bottom. Safeguards. To prevent rash decisions, any disbursement exceeding the standard annual allowance or any amendment to these bylaws requires 3 trustee signatures, one of which must be an independent party not related by blood or marriage. The 3-signature rule. I remembered it now. Grandfather had been obsessed with checks and balances. He didn't trust anyone with unchecked power, not even his own children. I sat back in my chair. 3 signatures. Currently, the trustees were Aunt Carol, Uncle Gordon, and who was the third? I racked my brain. It used to be Mr. Henderson, but after he died, had they replaced him or had they just stopped asking for the 3rd signature if they were operating without a 3rd independent trustee? Every decision they had made in the last 5 years might be invalid. I looked at the clock. It was 1 a.m. I was wired. I felt like I was finally seeing the board after playing in the dark for years. Then, my phone buzzed on the desk. I jumped. I picked it up. A text message. It was from my cousin Mara. Mara was the family mess. She was sweet, chaotic, and had a terrible habit of drinking too much white wine and hitting send on things she shouldn't. The text was an image, a screenshot. There was no caption, just the image. I tapped it to expand. It was a screenshot of a text thread. At the top, the group name was visible, Parker Core No Drama. The members listed were Carol, Sandra, Ethan, and Gordon. The screenshot captured a message from Carol, sent just minutes ago. It was pinned to the top of the chat, meaning it was the directive they were all operating under. Carol, we need to stay aligned. If she asks for documents, delay. We must limit Leah's access before she interferes with the amendment. Remind her that she is unstable if she pushes. I stared at the screen. Unstable. That was the narrative. That was the language they were finalizing. They weren't just cutting me out of the money, they were planning to destroy my credibility to do it. A second later, 3 dots appeared. Mara was typing. Then the message from Mara appeared. Shit. Wrong chat. Leah, ignore that. Then Leah, please delete that. I am so sorry. Please don't tell Mom. I didn't reply. I didn't delete it. I saved the image. I emailed it to myself. I saved it to my hard drive. I backed it up to the cloud. I looked at the photo of my grandfather on my desk. He looked back at me, stern and unyielding. Don't make this into a thing, my mother had said. Too late. I wasn't the one who made it a thing, but I was certainly going to be the one to finish it. I picked up a pen and a fresh notepad. I wrote down one-word timeline. Then I began to write. The screen on my phone had gone dark hours ago, but the image of the screenshot was burned into my retinas. Parker Core, no drama. A pinned message about limiting my access. A warning to treat me as unstable. I did not sleep that night. I did not pace. I sat at my kitchen island with a cup of tea that went cold before I took a single sip, staring at the granite countertop and breathing through my nose. My instinct, the hot, jagged part of me that felt like a wounded animal, wanted to drive to Aunt Carol's house and scream until the neighbors called the police. I wanted to print the screenshot, tape it to her front door, and demand to know why my own family was treating me like a liability. But that was exactly what they wanted. Remind her that she is unstable if she pushes. If I screamed, I was hysterical. If I cried, I was fragile. If I accused them without proof, I was paranoid. They had built a trap where any display of human emotion would be evidence of my unfitness. So I decided to be something else. I decided to be a consultant. I opened my laptop at 6 a.m. I drafted an email to Harrow and Crestfield Fiduciary Services. I did not mention the group chat. I did not mention the whispers. I wrote with the bland, terrifying, polite efficiency of a woman who is simply doing her administrative due diligence. Subject: preparation for upcoming trustee refresh meeting. Dear administrative team, thank you for the notification regarding the upcoming meeting. To ensure I am fully prepared to participate constructively, please forward the current governing documents of the Parker Family Fund, specifically the most recent bylaws, the schedule of assets, and a history of all amendments filed in the last 5 years. I look forward to reviewing these prior to our session. Sincerely, Leah Parker. I hit send. Then I showered, dressed in a sharp charcoal blazer, and went to work. The reply came 2 days later. It was signed by a junior associate named Marcus. Dear Ms. Parker, we have received your request. However, before we can release sensitive internal governance documents, we require you to submit an updated beneficiary information form. Our records indicate your file may be incomplete regarding current residency and employment status. Once this form is processed, we can review your document request. I stared at the screen. I had updated my address 6 months ago. They had mailed my tax documents to this house. They knew exactly where I lived and what I did. This wasn't protocol. This was a stall tactic. They were buying time. I printed the attached form. I filled it out in black ink. My handwriting precise and jagged. Name: Leah Parker, Occupation Management Consultant. Address: the same one you sent this letter to. I scanned it and sent it back within the hour with a note attached. Is the requested update. Please proceed with the document release immediately. They wanted to play paperwork ping-pong fine. I could play that game better than they could. While I waited for the administrative gears to grind, I needed to touch base with the past. I needed to see the only person in the family who presumably wasn't in a group chat plotting my demise. I drove to Foxridge on Saturday. Foxridge was an hour inland from Briarhaven, a town where the coastal humidity gave way to the dry heat of pine forests and old brick. It was where the Parker money had been made, in textiles and logistics, before the mills closed and the town slowly turned into a museum of itself. My grandmother, Evelyn Parker, lived in the same sprawling Victorian house she had shared with my grandfather for 50 years. The house smelled of lemon polish and silence. The heavy velvet drapes were drawn to keep out the afternoon sun, casting the living room in a perpetual amber twilight. "Grandma," I called out softly. She was in the sunroom at the back of the house, sitting in her rattan chair, staring out at the overgrown garden. She looked smaller than she had at the dinner. "Frail. Leah," she said, her face lighting up as I entered. "Look at you. You look just like your father today." I kissed her cheek. Her skin felt like parchment. "How are you feeling, Grandma?" "Oh, you know, the days run together. Carol says I'm doing well, so I suppose I must be." Carol says. It was always what Carol said. I sat on the ottoman beside her. I wanted to ask her about the fund. I wanted to ask if she knew they were calling me unstable, but looking at her, confused and gentle, I couldn't bring myself to break her peace. Instead, I took her hand. "I was thinking about Grandpa today. Silas." She sighed, a smile touching her lips. "He was a stubborn man. But he loved his family. He built everything for the family." "Did he ever talk to you about the rules for the fund?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. "About how he wanted decisions to be made." Evelyn frowned, her brow furrowing as she tried to catch a drifting memory. "He wanted everyone to have a say. He hated secrets. He used to say that secrets were rust. They eat the machine from the inside." She looked at me, her eyes suddenly sharp. "Why do you ask? Is Carol worried about money again?" "Again?" I asked. Evelyn waved a hand, the clarity fading as quickly as it had come. "Oh, I don't know. Carol handles the complicated things now. She and that nice man from the bank, Ethan, they tell me what to sign. It is easier that way. I get confused. Leah, the numbers are so big." A chill went down my spine. "They tell me what to sign. Do you have any of Grandpa's old papers here?" I asked. "Or did Carol take everything?" "There is a desk in the library," she said, gesturing vaguely toward the hall. "He kept his private thoughts there. Carol says it is all junk, but I like to keep it. It smells like his tobacco." I left her with her tea and went to the library. The room was dark, lined with bookshelves that hadn't been dusted in months. My grandfather's mahogany desk sat in the center, a monolith of a different era. I sat in his leather chair, the springs creaking under me. I opened the drawers. Most were empty or filled with mundane things: paper clips, old calendars, broken pens. Carol had likely swept through here years ago, but in the bottom drawer, tucked underneath a stack of blank stationery, I found a manila envelope. It was yellowed with age. The clasp rusted shut. On the front, in my grandfather's looping, aggressive script: "Fund amendments do not file yet." My heart hammered against my ribs. I carefully pried the clasp open. Inside was a single document. It was a draft, typed on a typewriter, with handwritten notes in the margins. It was dated 2 weeks before he died. I read the first paragraph. "Amendment to Distribution Protocol. To ensure the longevity of the Parker lineage, it is my intent that the beneficiary council shall have equal voting weight regardless of age or financial status. No single branch of the family shall hold dominion over the assets." He had underlined equal voting weight 3 times. I turned the page. In the event of a dispute, an independent mediator must be appointed. No trustee shall have the power to suspend a beneficiary's rights without a unanimous vote of all other beneficiaries. This wasn't just a draft. It was a shield. He had foreseen exactly what was happening. He knew Carol's ambition. He knew the potential for greed. But it was unsigned. It was just a draft, a ghost of a wish that had never become law. I took out my phone and photographed every page. Then I put the document back in the envelope and tucked it deep inside my purse. I wasn't leaving it here for Carol to find and shred. As I walked back to the sunroom, my phone buzzed in my pocket. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. 5 minutes later, it buzzed again. This time, the caller ID said, "Aunt Carol." I took a breath, composed my face, and answered. Hello. Carol. Leah. Darling, Carol's voice was bright, airy, and completely terrifying. I was just calling to check in. Sandra told me you sounded a little strained on the phone the other day. I stood in the hallway of my grandmother's house, clutching the evidence of her father's true intentions, and listened to his daughter lie to me. I am fine. Carol. Just busy with work. I am actually visiting Grandma right now. There was a pause, a sharp intake of breath. Oh, you are in Fox Ridge. You should have told us. We could have coordinated. Is she okay? You know she gets overwhelmed if there are too many visitors. She seems fine. Carol, we are just talking. Well, just be careful, Carol said, her voice dropping to a register of mock intimacy. You know how she is. She gets confused. We try not to upset her with business talk or family drama. I haven't mentioned any drama. I said, because I didn't know there was any. Carol laughed. A dry, tinkling sound. Of course not. But you know, Leah, I wanted to mention, I heard from Harrow and Crestfield that you are asking for a lot of documents. News traveled fast. I'm just preparing for the meeting. I said, Carol sighed. Listen, honey, I know you like to be thorough, but honestly, you do not need to worry about all that legal mumbo-jumbo. It is so dry. And frankly, I worry about you taking on too much. You have your own business, your own life. The fund is supposed to be a support, not a source of stress. I am not stressed. Carol, you sound tense, she countered. Look, we just want to protect you. Sometimes, when people get too deep into the weeds of the finances, it brings up ugly feelings. Greed, jealousy. We don't want that for you. You have always been so sensitive. There it was. The setup. Sensitive. Unstable. I appreciate the concern. I said, keeping my voice flat. But I would like to read the bylaws myself. It is just how my brain works. Fine, Carol said, the warmth evaporating instantly. Do what you need to do. But don't say I didn't warn you about the headache. She hung up. I said goodbye to Evelyn, promising to return soon, and drove back to Briarhaven. The road felt longer this time. That evening, another email pinged. From Ethan Whitmore, Stonebridge Wealth Strategies, subject. Let's connect /fun stuff. Hey Leah, heard through the grapevine you're looking into the fund mechanics. Totally get it. It's complicated stuff. Since I handle the portfolio side of things at Stonebridge, maybe we could grab coffee. I can walk you through the basics so you're not going in blind at the meeting. We all want peace here. Let me know. Ethan. We all want peace. The universal sign-off of someone preparing for war. I replied, sure, Tuesday at 10 a.m., the Roasted Bean. I arrived at the Roasted Bean 15 minutes early. I chose a table in the corner, back to the wall. With a clear view of the entrance, I set my phone on the table, face down, and turned on the voice memo app. Ethan arrived 5 minutes late. He was wearing a vest over a dress shirt, the uniform of finance bros everywhere. He looked polished, confident, and utterly harmless. That was his trick. Ethan played the golden retriever while Carol held the leash. Leah, he exclaimed, pulling out a chair. Good to see you. You look great. Tired, maybe, but great. Thanks. Ethan, I said, I appreciate you meeting me. Of course. Of course. He waved at a barista. Just a black coffee for me. He leaned in, clasping his hands on the table. So, the fund? I decided to play dumb. I wanted to see how he would spin it. I just feel a bit out of the loop. I said, I realized I haven't seen the actual rules in years. And with this meeting coming up, I wanted to understand how things work. Ethan nodded sympathetically. Totally. It is a beast, honestly. Even I get a headache looking at the compliance stuff. But here is the high-level view. The fund is transitioning. Transitioning to what modernization, he said, dropping the buzzword like a poker chip. Grandpa Silas set this up 40 years ago. The markets were different. The family was smaller. We need to be more agile. We are moving toward a model that protects the principal more aggressively. And what does that mean for the beneficiaries, I asked. He sighed, looking pained. Well, that is the hard part. We have to be realistic. The automatic distributions. They are draining the corpus. We are looking at shifting to a needs-based model. Needs-based, I repeated. Who defines the need? The trustees. Naturally, he said, it is just safer. Look, Leah, I will be honest. Some people in the family, they have been irresponsible. We can't just hand out checks if the money is going to bad choices. He was talking about me, or rather, the version of me they had concocted in the group chat. And who are these irresponsible people, I asked. He waved a hand. I am not naming names. It is just a general risk. We want to make sure the money goes to things that align with the family values. Family values, the ultimate weapon. I see. I said, so, to be clear, you are proposing an amendment that would strip the automatic distribution and replace it with a system where Carol and Gordon decide if I deserve money. Ethan flinched. Whoa. That is a harsh way to put it. It is not about deserving, it is about alignment. And it is not just Carol, it is the consensus. Consensus of whom I asked. The beneficiaries haven't voted. Ethan blinked. He looked momentarily flustered. Well, the chat consensus is, the trustees feel. I froze. He had said it. The chat. He caught himself. His eyes widening slightly. The discussions we have had, informally. I took a sip of my coffee to hide my smile. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a hunter who just watched the prey step on a twig. So the decision has already been made. I asked softly. No, nothing is finalized. That is what the meeting is for. But look, Leah, I am telling you this as a friend. If you go in there demanding old-school rules, you are going to look out of touch. The family wants to move forward. If you fight the modernization, people are going to wonder why you are so desperate for the cash. There it was, the threat. If you fight us, we will paint you as greedy. I nodded slowly. I understand your position. Ethan, thank you for explaining it. I didn't argue. I didn't pull out the screenshot. I let him think he had cowed me. When I got back to my car, I stopped the recording. I saved the file as Ethan_confession_chat.mp3. I went home and cleared the wall in my home office. I took down my project timelines for the logistics firm and put up a fresh sheet of butcher paper. I wrote timeline at the top in red marker. I started plotting the data points I had. 2010. Grandfather dies. Mr. Henderson attorney is the third trustee. 2015 Mr. Henderson dies. 2016. Harrow Crestfield takes over administration. 2017 first mention of modernization in the annual letter. 2018. Ethan joins Stonebridge Wealth. 2019 distributions become irregular. 2020. The Parker Core chat is likely formed based on Mara's slip. Present day. The attempt to rewrite the bylaws. I stepped back. The pattern was clear. Everything intensified after the third trustee died. They never replaced him. They just consolidated power. My phone rang. It was Jenna. Leah, are you sitting down? She asked. I am standing. But I can lean. What did you find? I did a deep dive on Stonebridge Wealth Strategies. She said, Ethan's firm. And they are a boutique firm, right? Mostly private equity handling. But I looked at their public disclosures. Guess who they have a standing consulting contract with? I closed my eyes, anticipating the answer. Harrow and Crestfield bingo. Jenna said, Stonebridge provides strategic investment advice to Harrow and Crestfield, and Harrow and Crestfield pays them a quarterly retainer. I looked at my timeline. So, I said, my voice cold, the administrator of our fund is paying my cousin's employer, which means, Jenna continued, that Ethan has a direct financial incentive to keep Harrow and Crestfield happy, and Harrow and Crestfield has an incentive to keep the trustees happy so they don't get fired. It is a circle jerk. Leah. A conflict of interest so big you could drive a truck through it. If Ethan is influencing the fund decisions, I said, and he is getting a kickback via his firm, then he is breaching his fiduciary duty. Jenna finished, and so is Carol. If she knows about it, she knows. I said, she knows everything. This is leverage. Leah, this is real leverage. I hung up and looked at the timeline again. The web was tighter than I thought. It wasn't just family politics. It was a racket. 2 days later, the packet from Harrow and Crestfield finally arrived. It was a thick manila envelope, sent via certified mail. I signed for it, feeling the weight of the paper in my hands. I took it to the kitchen table and cut it open with a knife. I pulled out the stack. Agenda for Trustee Refresh Meeting, Current Asset Allocation Summary, Beneficiary Contact List, Tax Summaries for 2023, 2024, 2025. I spread them out. I was looking for one thing: the bylaws, the constitution of the fund. I shuffled through the papers. I checked the envelope again to make sure I hadn't missed anything. At the very bottom of the stack was a single sheet of paper with the Harrow and Crestfield letterhead. It read, "Regarding request for historical bylaws and amendment log. These documents are classified as internal governance material. Access to these records is restricted to acting trustees to protect the privacy of the grantor. Beneficiary access is available only upon trustee approval. Please submit a formal request to the Board of Trustees for consideration." I laughed. It was a short, sharp sound that echoed in the empty kitchen. They weren't going to give me the rules. They expected me to walk into a game where they held all the cards. They made all the moves, and they had erased the rulebook. Available upon trustee approval, meaning available upon Carol's approval, meaning never. I picked up the do not file draft I had stolen from my grandfather's desk. I looked at the words, equal beneficiaries. They thought they had walled me off. They thought the missing bylaws were a dead end. But they didn't know I had the map of what the fund was supposed to be. And they didn't know I knew about the money trail between Ethan and the administrators. I took out a fresh sticky note and stuck it to the refusal letter. On it, I wrote, "Challenge accepted." I wasn't just going to that meeting to listen. I was going to burn their narrative to the ground. The decision to attend the trustee refresh meeting was not made lightly. It was a strategic calculation, the kind I used to make for clients when they were facing a hostile takeover. If you are not in the room, you are on the menu. That was the adage. And in the case of the Parker Family Fund, I was not just on the menu. I was being carved up and served as an hors d'oeuvre. I did not tell my mother. I did not tell Aunt Carol. I certainly did not tell Ethan. The only person who knew my coordinates was Jenna, and she was treating this operation with the gravity of a federal indictment. I booked a room at the Fox Ridge Inn, a modest 2-story motel on the edge of town that smelled of pine sol and damp carpet. It was a far cry from the boutique hotels Carol favored, but it had the distinct advantage of being anonymous. I paid in cash. I parked my car around the back, near the dumpster, so my license plate wouldn't be visible from the main road. Foxridge was a small town. A distinct navy sedan with Briarhaven plates would be noticed by the wrong people. I arrived on a Tuesday morning. 3 days before the scheduled meeting, the humidity had broken, replaced by a sharp, dry heat that made the pine needles crunch underfoot. I dressed not in my usual consulting power suits, but in slacks and a soft sweater, trying to look less like an adversary and more like a confused beneficiary. My first stop was the local office of Harrow and Crestfield. It was located in a renovated brick building on Main Street, sandwiched between a boutique law firm and a high-end bakery. The frosted glass door whispered shut behind me, sealing out the street noise. The lobby was aggressively tasteful beige walls, abstract art that looked like spilled coffee, and a receptionist's desk that seemed to be made of a single slab of marble. The receptionist was young, perhaps 24, with a headset tangled in her hair. She looked up, her smile practiced. "Good morning. Welcome to Harrow and Crestfield. How can I help you?" "Hi," I said, keeping my voice light. "I am Leah Parker. I am in town for the family meeting later this week, and I wanted to drop off some paperwork in person." The name registered immediately. Her smile faltered, just for a fraction of a second. Before she rebooted it, "Oh, Ms. Parker, we weren't expecting you until Thursday." "I know," I said, leaning casually against the high desk. "I just happened to be in the area visiting my grandmother. I wanted to check on the status of my beneficiary update form. I sent it over a few days ago." "Right," she said, typing furiously. Let me just pull up the file. She stared at the screen, her brow furrowing. I saw her eyes dart to a sticky note on the monitor, then back to me. I see the form here, she said. It is pending review. Mr. Sterling handles the Parker account directly. Is Mr. Sterling in? I asked. He's in a conference call, she said quickly. Too quickly. But let me see if his assistant, David, can help you. She picked up the phone and whispered something I couldn't catch. A moment later, a side door opened and a man in his 30s walked out. He looked tired, with sleeves rolled up and a tie that had been loosened hours ago. Ms. Parker, he said, extending a hand. I am David. We spoke on the phone. We hadn't. But I didn't correct him. Hi, David, I said. I am just trying to get clarity on the document request. I still haven't received the amendment history. David sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 billable hours. Right, the historical docs. As we stated in the letter, those are restricted. Restricted from a beneficiary, I asked. Well, yes, he said, shifting his weight. For non-voting beneficiaries, the access is limited to the current fiscal year's tax summaries and the distribution schedule. We have to protect the privacy of the voting block. The world seemed to stop spinning. I stared at him. I am sorry, I said, my voice dropping an octave. What did you just call me? He blinked, realizing he had stepped onto a landmine. Excuse me, you called me a non-voting beneficiary, I said. Since when is that a classification? The original deed grants equal voting rights to all direct descendants. David's face went pale. He looked at the receptionist, then back at me. Oh, I apologize. That is just internal shorthand. It is not a legal designation. Internal shorthand for what I pressed, for people you intend to remove. No, absolutely not, he stammered. It just refers to active participation. Since you haven't attended meetings in the past, the system defaults to… Look, I should not have used that term. I apologize. It is just a database tag. He was lying. I could see the panic rising in his throat. He had revealed the game. They had already reclassified me in their system. To them, my vote was already gone. I want that in writing. I said, what I want a written statement clarifying that non-voting beneficiary is an internal error and not a reflection of my legal standing, and I want the amendment log. Today. David swallowed hard. I have to check with Mr. Sterling. Check with him. I said, I will wait. I sat in one of the beige armchairs and waited for 45 minutes. I didn't look at my phone. I didn't read a magazine. I just watched the door. Eventually, David emerged. He looked like he had been yelled at. He held a thin manila folder. Here is a partial log, he said, his voice tight. It covers the last 3 years. Mr. Sterling authorized this as a courtesy. Regarding the other matter, he assures you that your status is fully active. He didn't give me the written statement. I took the folder. Thank you. David, I said, I will see you on Thursday. I walked out into the sunshine, my hands shaking. I needed to see my mother. I met Sandra for lunch at a cafe near the town square. It was a place we used to go when I was a child, famous for its spinach quiche and sweet tea. My mother was already there, sitting at a small table near the window. She was wearing oversized sunglasses and a scarf, as if she were a celebrity trying to avoid the paparazzi, or a woman trying to hide a bruise. Mom, I said, sliding into the booth. Leah. She jumped, knocking her silverware against the china. You startled me. Why didn't you text me you were here? I wanted to surprise you, I said. She took off her sunglasses. Her eyes looked tired, rimmed with red. She looked at me with a mixture of love and abject terror. You shouldn't be here. Leah, she whispered. Carol thinks you are in Briarhaven. I am aware of what Carol thinks. I said, I just came from Harrow and Crestfield. Sandra's hand flew to her throat. You went to the office. Oh, Leah, why Carol said we should let them handle the paperwork. You are going to make them angry. Make who angry? Mom. The administrators or the family. Everyone, she hissed. You are stirring things up. Why can't you just let it be? The fund takes care of us. It pays for your grandmother's care. It helped me with the roof last year. Why do you want to ruin that? I reached across the table and took her hand. It was cold and trembling. Mom, listen to me. They have me listed as a non-voting beneficiary in their system. They are planning to cut me out. And if they can cut me out, they can cut you out too. Sandra pulled her hand away as if I had burned her. That is ridiculous. I am a trustee. Are you? I asked. Do you know what you are signing? Of course I do. Carol explains it all to me. She is very good at breaking it down. The legal language is so dense. Leah, you know I have no head for it. Carol handles the strategy. Strategy? That word again. Mom, I said gently. Did you sign an amendment 2 years ago about beneficiary conduct? Sandra looked away, staring out the window at a passing truck. I think so. It was just a standard thing. To protect the family reputation. We can't have people doing things that reflect poorly on the Parker name. Doing things like what I asked. Being single, working, asking questions. Don't be difficult, she snapped. But there was no heat in it, just fear. It is for our protection. Carol says the world is watching us. We have to be united. Please, Leah, for me, don't embarrass everyone at the meeting. Just listen to them. They have a plan. I looked at her. Really looked at her. My mother wasn't a villain. She wasn't malicious. She was a woman who had been systematically stripped of her confidence by a sister who wielded concern like a cudgel. Carol had convinced Sandra that she was too stupid to understand the money, too fragile to handle the truth, and too dependent to survive without the family hierarchy. I realized then that I wasn't just fighting for my share. I was fighting to get my mother out of a cult. I promise I won't embarrass you. Mom, I said, but I am going to ask questions. Sandra looked at me with tears welling in her eyes. You are just like your father, she whispered. He never knew when to stop digging either. I didn't tell her that my father was the only reason we had any money to begin with. I went back to the motel room and spread the documents David had given me on the bed. The partial log was a joke, just a list of dates and titles, with most of the actual text redacted or summarized. But it was enough. I found the entry Sandra had mentioned. Amendment 4B, adopted October 2024. Title Beneficiary, Conduct and Alignment Clause. Summary establishes protocols for suspension of discretionary distributions in cases where a beneficiary's public or private conduct poses a reputational risk to the fund or disrupts family unity. Determination of risk is at the sole discretion of the Board of Trustees. Family unity, a legal term for shut up and do what you are told. I scanned further back. I was looking for the money, the modernization Ethan had talked about. I found an entry from 3 years ago. Investment reallocation. Approved June 2023. Authorized a strategic program support allocation to regional nonprofit partners. Program support. That sounded like a grant. Grants were normal. But the amount caught my eye. Allocation $400,000. That was nearly 10% of the liquid cash the fund usually held. I cross-referenced it with the tax summary I had from my own files, the K-1 form from that year. The deduction was listed under charitable and programmatic disbursements. But the recipient wasn't the Red Cross or the local hospital. The recipient was listed as WHV Initiative. I grabbed my laptop. I searched for WHV Initiative Foxridge. Nothing. I searched Whitmore Heritage Ventures. Bingo. It was a registered 501c3 organization, the registered agent Carol Whitmore, the address APO Box in Foxridge, the stated mission, to preserve and promote the cultural heritage of the region. Carol had a vanity foundation, and the Parker Family Fund had allocated $400,000 to it. But here was the kicker. I dug into the tax filings for Whitmore Heritage Ventures. They were public record. In 2023, WHV received $400,000. In 2024, WHV paid out $350,000 in consulting fees and venue renovation. I searched the property records for Whitmore Heritage Ventures. They owned one asset, a historic farmhouse on the edge of town, Carol's weekend retreat. My blood ran cold. They weren't just cutting me out to protect the family name. They were cutting me out because they were looting the vault. Carol was using the fund to renovate her private vacation home under the guise of cultural heritage, and she had labeled the money program support, so it wouldn't look like a loan she had to pay back. And Ethan was the financial advisor. He had to sign off on the valuation. He had to know. I needed to talk to Ethan. I checked the time. It was 5 p.m. Ethan usually played golf at the Fox Ridge Country Club on Tuesday evenings. It was a ritual. I drove to the club. I didn't go in. I waited in the parking lot, near his glossy black SUV. He came out at 6:30, tossing his clubs into the trunk. He looked relaxed, flushed from the sun and maybe a drink or two. "Ethan," I called out. He spun around, nearly dropping his keys. "Leah." "Jesus, you scared me. What are you doing here? I thought you were in Briarhaven." I walked closer, stopping just outside of his personal space. "I decided to come up early. We need to talk." He looked around the parking lot nervously. "Here. Now." "Leah, I am tired. Can't this wait until the meeting?" "No." I said, "It can't." I crossed my arms. "Tell me about Whitmore Heritage Ventures." Ethan's face went blank. A mask slammed down over his features. "I don't know what you are talking about. Don't insult my intelligence." "Ethan, I saw the allocation. $400,000 for program support. That went to Carol's foundation, which owns the farmhouse she is renovating." Ethan let out a short, nervous laugh. "You are confused. That is a community asset. The fund supports local history. It is a vacation home." "Ethan, and you signed off on the transfer. That is self-dealing. That is fraud." Ethan stepped closer, his voice dropping to a hiss. "You need to be very careful about the words you use. Leah, you are throwing around accusations you don't understand." "I understand math," I said, "and I understand that if I show those tax returns to the IRS, your license at Stonebridge is toast." Ethan's eyes narrowed. He didn't look like the golden retriever anymore. He looked like a cornered rat. "Listen to me," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You think you have found some smoking gun? You have found a rounding error. The family approved that project. It is all documented." "Did the beneficiaries vote on it?" I asked. "Did I vote on it?" "The trustees voted," he said. "And if you try to blow this up, if you try to drag Carol's name through the mud, you will find out just how close this circle is. Is that a threat?" "It is a reality check. If you push this, the board will vote to freeze all discretionary distributions pending a governance review. That review could take years. You won't see a dime. Not for your house, not for your business, nothing. So the strategy is to starve me out," I asked. "The strategy," Ethan said, opening his car door, "is to manage the people who are a danger to the legacy. You are acting unstable. Leah, you are seeing conspiracies where there is just business. Go back to the motel. Calm down, or you will be the one who ends up with nothing." He got in the car and slammed the door. I watched him drive away. He had slipped. Go back to the motel. I hadn't told anyone I was staying at a motel. They were watching me, or at least, they knew I was here. I drove back to the Fox Ridge Inn, my heart pounding. I locked the door and wedged a chair under the handle. It felt melodramatic, but the feeling of being hunted was visceral. I called Jenna. "Jenna," I said, "we need to go nuclear." I told her everything. The non-voting slip, the conduct clause, the $400,000 to Carol's farmhouse, Ethan's threat. Jenna was silent for a moment. Then she whistled low. "Okay," she said. "They are not just mean. Leah, they are criminals. That is embezzlement, or at least a massive breach of trust. What do I do?" "We draft a letter," Jenna said. "Not a request. A demand. We cite the conflict of interest with Stonebridge. We cite the irregularity of the WHV disbursement, and we demand a full forensic accounting review by an independent third party. Will they agree?" "No," Jenna said. "They will refuse. But we send it certified mail. Return receipt requested. We copy every trustee. We create a record that you asked for an audit before the meeting. That way, if they try to kick you out during the meeting, it looks like retaliation for whistleblowing. Retaliation. I said, I like that word. We spent the next 3 hours on the phone, drafting the document. It was a masterpiece of legal aggression. It was dry, factual, and absolutely scathing. Redemand for full disclosure and independent accounting review. To the Board of Trustees. As a beneficiary with equal standing under the original grantor trust deed, I hereby formally object to the Conduct and Alignment Clause as vague and ultra-virus. Furthermore, I demand an immediate explanation regarding the $400,000 disbursement to Whitmore Heritage Ventures, an entity controlled by Trustee Carol Whitmore. Failure to provide transparent records regarding this transaction will be viewed as a breach of fiduciary duty. I printed it out at the motel's business center at midnight. The next morning, I went to the post office and sent it. Certified, overnight delivery. Then, the silence started. It was deafening. Usually, my phone buzzed with random family updates, photos of cousins' kids, memes from Mara, check-ins from my mom. By Wednesday afternoon, my phone was a brick. I texted my cousin Mara, "Hey, are we still on for coffee before the meeting?" No reply. I texted my mom, "Are you okay?" 3 hours later, a reply, "Please do not text me right now. I am resting." Formal, distant. I called my grandmother's house to see if I could visit. Carol's assistant, a woman named Patty, answered. "Oh, Leah, I am so sorry," Patty said, her voice sugary sweet. "Evelyn is not up for visitors today. She is having a femme day. We are keeping the environment very quiet." They were cutting the lines. They were isolating me. I sat in the motel room, staring at the beige walls. I felt incredibly small. Was I crazy? Was I making a mountain out of a molehill? Maybe the farmhouse was a community center. Maybe the clause was just standard boilerplate. Maybe I was the problem. Doubt is the most effective weapon they have. It doesn't leave a bruise, but it cripples you just the same. Then, at 10 o'clock at night, my laptop pinged. New email. The sender was truthseeker1985@gmail.com. The subject line was, "You're not crazy, ... My hands shook as I opened it, ... There was no text in the body of the email, ... Just 3 attachments, images. I clicked on the first one. It was a screenshot of the Parker Core chat. Time-stamped 2 hours ago. Carol, she sent a demand letter. Who is advising her? She is using legal terms. Ethan. It doesn't matter. She is bluffing. She doesn't have the bylaws. I clicked the second image. Gordon. This is getting messy. Carol. If she brings up the WHV money in the meeting. Carol. She won't. We control the room. We control the agenda. I clicked the third image, the one that made my breath hitch in my throat. Carol, here is the plan. If Leah shows up, we let her speak. Then we cite the instability demonstrated by her aggressive emails and stalking Ethan in the parking lot. We call for a vote to remove her as a beneficiary under the Conduct Clause. I have the votes. Ethan agreed. It is for her own good. She needs help, not money. I stared at the screen. Stalking Ethan. They had twisted the confrontation. They were framing my investigation as harassment. They were going to ambush me. They were going to publicly humiliate me, label me mentally unstable, and strip me of my inheritance in front of the entire family. I sat back, the glow of the screen illuminating the dark motel room. I wasn't scared anymore. The fear evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. They thought they had the votes. They thought they had the control. But they had made one fatal mistake. They had put it in writing. And now? So did I. I saved the images. I forwarded them to Jenna. I forwarded them to a secure cloud drive. Then I closed my laptop, turned off the lights, and for the first time in a week, I slept. I had a meeting to attend. The anonymous email with the screenshots sat in my inbox like a radioactive isotope. I stared at the pixelated images of my family's group chat. Parker Core no drama, and felt a strange, cold detachment settle over me, in a different life. Perhaps the version of me from 5 years ago. I would have printed these out and driven straight to my mother's house to scream until my throat was raw. I would have demanded an explanation. I would have cried. But crying was exactly what they were banking on. Tears were currency in their narrative. Every sob would buy them another vote to remove me for instability. She needs help, not money. Ethan had written. I closed the laptop gently. I poured the rest of the lukewarm coffee down the sink in the motel kitchenette. I washed the mug. I dried it. I was not a hysterical niece. I was a consultant. And when a client is hostile, you do not argue, you audit. I spent the next morning organizing my files. I created a digital clean room, a secure, encrypted folder where I cataloged every inconsistency. The timeline on the wall grew denser. Around 11 o'clock, I drove to my grandmother's house. I parked down the street, watching for Carol's white Range Rover or Ethan's SUV. The driveway was empty. I let myself in with the key I had kept since college. The house was quiet, the air conditioning humming a low, steady bass note. Grandma, I called out. Evelyn was in the breakfast nook, staring at a piece of toast she hadn't touched. She looked frail today, her silver hair unkempt, a stark contrast to the perfectly coiffed matriarch she had been for decades. Leah, she asked, her eyes struggling to focus. Is that you? It is me, Grandma. I sat down across from her. She reached out a trembling hand, and I took it. Her skin was dry, like old parchment. Where is everyone? She asked. The house is so quiet. Carol usually has the radio on. Carol is busy. I said, I thought I would come have tea with you. That would be nice, she said, a small smile appearing. Silas always liked tea in the morning. He said coffee made him jumpy. I went to the kitchen and put the kettle on, while it boiled. I watched her through the doorway. She was tracing the pattern on the tablecloth with her finger, lost in a memory. I brought the mugs in and set them down. Grandma, I said softly, do you remember when Grandpa set up the fund? She blinked, looking at me. The fund? Yes, for the children, to keep you safe. Do you remember who helped him? I asked. Who signed the papers? Mr. Henderson, she said immediately. Good man. Wore bow ties. Silas trusted him. I took a sip of tea. Grandpa had a rule, didn't he, about the signatures? Evelyn's hand stopped moving on the tablecloth. Her head snapped up, and for a fleeting moment, the fog cleared. Her eyes were sharp, blue, and terrified. 3, she whispered. 3 what? 3 names, she said, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. He told me. He made me promise. Never let Carol touch the signatures alone. She moves too fast. She doesn't read. My stomach twisted. Does Carol sign things now? I asked. Evelyn looked at the window, her gaze drifting back into the middle distance. Carol takes care of it. She brings me the papers. She says, sign here. Mother, it is for the taxes. So I sign. I just want everyone to be happy. She took a sip of her tea. The moment of clarity gone as quickly as it had arrived. Ideally, this toast should be warmer, she noted. Poking the bread, I sat there for a long time, watching her eat cold toast. Never let Carol touch the signatures. My grandfather knew. He knew his daughter's ambition exceeded her patience. I left the house an hour later with a new target. If the rule was 3 signatures, and Mr. Henderson was dead, and I was being excluded, then who was the 3rd signature? Or had they simply stopped bothering with the 3rd line? I drove back to the motel and drafted a new email to Harrow and Crestfield. This time, I didn't ask for the bylaws. I asked for the disbursement authorization records. Subject request for transaction verification. Reference, WH. Liquidity advance to the Compliance Department regarding the $400,000 disbursement to Whitmore Heritage Ventures, dated June 2023. Please provide the authorized signature page for this transaction. As a beneficiary, I am exercising my right to verify that all internal controls regarding the 3-signature requirement were met. Leah Parker. The The response came within 20 minutes. They were watching my inbox. Dear Ms. Parker, we cannot comply with this request. Specific transaction authorizations contain private biometric data signatures of the trustees and are protected under our privacy policy. We assure you that all disbursements are executed in accordance with the active governance protocols. Privacy. They were claiming privacy to hide the fact that they were breaking the rules. I called Jenna. They stonewalled me. I said, they cited privacy on the signatures. Of course they did, Jenna said, her voice tinny through the speakerphone. Because they don't have 3 signatures. Or worse, the 3rd signature is a forgery. What do I do? I asked. Use the refusal, Jenna said. In a court of law, a refusal to produce a critical document when accused of impropriety is often interpreted as an adverse inference. Basically, if they won't show you the check, it is because the check proves you are right. I need more than an inference. Jenna, I need a smoking gun. Then go find the person who would have signed it. She said, Who is the weak link, Gordon? I said, My Uncle Gordon was a large man with a soft heart and a spine made of gelatin. He had never been malicious, just passively complicit. He drifted through life on the wake of stronger personalities, first his father, then his wife, now his sister Carol. I found him at the marina in Briarhaven. He spent most of his Tuesdays tinkering on his boat, a 30-foot cruiser that hadn't left the dock in 3 years. He was polishing the brass railing when I walked down the pier. He looked up, squinting against the sun, and his face fell when he saw me. Leah, he said, wiping his hands on a rag. I didn't expect to see you. I bet, I said, stopping at the edge of the slip. Can I come aboard? Uncle Gordon? He hesitated, looking around as if Carol might rappel down from a helicopter to stop him. Finally, he sighed. Sure, come on up. I stepped onto the boat. It smelled of diesel and teak oil. I sat on the vinyl bench seat while he busied himself with the rag. How is the consulting business, he asked, refusing to meet my eyes. It is good, I said. Better than the family business. Apparently. Gordon flinched. What is that supposed to mean I know about the $400,000? Gordon, I know it went to Carol's foundation. And I know about the Parker Core chat, where you all discuss how to handle me. Gordon stopped polishing. He slumped onto the captain's chair, the rag dangling from his hand. He looked suddenly very old. It is not like that. Leah, the chat. It is just venting. Carol gets intense. We just need a place to coordinate without upsetting your mother. Coordinate lies, I asked. Coordinate peace, he corrected weakly. Look, you have always been independent. You ask a lot of questions. Carol just wanted to get everything in order before we brought you in. In order, I asked. You mean you wanted to hide the loan before I saw the books? It wasn't a loan, he snapped. Looking up. It was a bridge for the family. What are you talking about? Gordon ran a hand over his face. You don't know, do you? You were off in Atlanta or Charlotte or wherever you were 5 years ago. You didn't see it. The shipping business, Parker Logistics. We almost lost it. I stared at him. Grandpa's company, I thought we sold that division years ago. We kept a controlling stake, Gordon said. But the contracts dried up. We had a cash flow crisis. Payroll was going to bounce. We were looking at bankruptcy. Leah, real bankruptcy, the kind that makes the news. So what did you do? I asked, though I already knew the answer. We used the fund, he whispered, just to float the payroll, just for a few months. We paid it back, mostly. Who signed for it? I asked. The bylaws require 3 signatures. Mr. Henderson was dead. Who was the third? Gordon looked at the deck. Carol handled the paperwork. It was right after the funeral. We were all a mess. She brought me a stack of papers. Must have been 50 pages. She said, sign here. Gordon, we have to save the company. So I signed. And the third signature, Gordon closed his eyes. I think she signed for Mom. She has power of attorney. Leah. She said it was legal. I felt the blood drain from my face. Power of attorney ends at the grave, or at the trust document. You cannot use a power of attorney to sign as a trustee for someone else. especially if that person is mentally incapacitated. So Carol is signing for herself, for you, and for Evelyn. I said, she is the entire board. She saved the company. Gordon pleaded, we would have lost everything. And now I asked, what is the $400,000 for Whitmore Heritage Ventures? Is that saving the company too? Gordon looked away, his face turning a deep, shameful red. That is different. Carol said she earned it. For managing everything all these years. She calls it deferred compensation. Compensation, I repeated. She is looting the fund to renovate her vacation home, and she is calling it back pay, and you are letting her do it because she has dirt on you about the payroll bailout. Gordon didn't answer. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. If I expose this, I said, you could go to jail. Gordon, fraud, embezzlement. I know, he whispered. That is why you have to stop. Leah, please, just take the allowance they offer. Don't look under the hood. If you pull the thread, the whole sweater unravels. And your mother? She can't handle that shame. I stood up. My legs felt unsteady. I am not the one who unraveled it. Gordon, you did that when you signed those papers. I walked away. He didn't call after me. I drove back to the motel, my mind racing. The quiet crisis explained everything. It explained the secrecy, the defensiveness, the desperation. They weren't just greedy. They were guilty. They had broken the law years ago to save the family business, and now they were trapped in a cycle of cover-ups. Carol was the ringleader, using their shared guilt to keep them in line, and paying herself a handsome bonus for the trouble. I needed to nail down the timeline. I opened my laptop and pulled up the partial amendment log David had given me. I cross-referenced it with a cache of old family emails and social media posts I had scraped from the internet. I looked at Amendment 3.A, filed February 12, 2021. This was the amendment that removed the requirement for an annual audit. I checked my cousin Mara's Instagram. On February 12, 2021, the entire family, Carol, Gordon, Sandra, Ethan, was in Cabo San Lucas for a wellness retreat. I remembered because I wasn't invited. I looked at the filing location on the amendment, Notary Public, Fox Ridge, North Carolina. They couldn't have signed it in Fox Ridge if they were in Mexico, which meant they had pre-signed blank pages, or Carol had forged them later and backdated it. I checked another one, Amendment 4B, the Conduct Clause, dated October 24, 2023. On that day, Carol was in New York City accepting an award for her nonprofit work. There was a press release about it. Yet her signature was notarized in Fox Ridge on that day. It was sloppy. They had gotten comfortable. They thought no one would ever check the dates. Then I looked at the money. I pulled up the public filings for Stonebridge Wealth Strategies again. I looked at their assets under management and their fee structure. I noticed a correlation. Every time the Parker Family Fund filed an amendment that restricted beneficiary rights, Stonebridge Wealth Strategies received a spike in consulting revenue in their quarterly report. October 2023. Conduct Clause added. November 2023. Stonebridge reports a $50,000 increase in consulting fees. June 2023. Whitmore Heritage Ventures gets $400,000. July 2023. Stonebridge reports a $30,000 performance bonus. It was a kickback loop. Carol authorized the money to move. Ethan facilitated the transfer through Stonebridge, and Stonebridge took a cut that likely flowed back to Ethan. I had enough. I had the motive, the method, and the errors, but I needed to look Carol in the eye. I needed to see if she had any soul left, or if she was just a calculator in a silk blouse. I texted her, Carol, I am in town. I know about the 3 signatures. Meet me at the High Street Bakery. Public place. Just you and me. Or I send my findings to the IRS before the meeting. She replied in 3 minutes. See you in 20. The High Street Bakery was crowded, filled with the noise of espresso machines and chatter. It was neutral ground. Carol walked in wearing a cream-colored cashmere coat and sunglasses, looking like a celebrity avoiding the paparazzi. She spotted me and glided over, sliding into the chair opposite mine. She didn't take off her sunglasses. "Leah," she said, her voice smooth, "you really are dramatic. Threatening the IRS. That is a nuclear option. Darling, it is the only option when the trustees are looting the vault." I said. Carol signaled a waiter and ordered a sparkling water. She turned back to me, a small, pitying smile playing on her lips. "Looting. Such an ugly word. We are preserving. Do you have any idea what it takes to keep this family afloat? The decisions we have to make. I know you used the fund to bail out Parker Logistics." I said. Carol didn't flinch. She adjusted her cuff. "We utilized assets to protect the family legacy. If the business had failed, the Parker name would be mud in this town. We did what was necessary, and the $400,000 to your renovation project was that necessary. That is an investment," she said coolly. "Whitmore Heritage Ventures will be a premier cultural center. It will bring prestige to the family. And yes, I am managing it. Who else would you? You are too busy with your spreadsheets. You are renovating your vacation home with charity money. Carol, that is not prestige. That is theft." Carol leaned forward, lowering her glasses to look at me with eyes like flint. "Be very careful. Leah, you think you are the hero of this story. You are a liability. You have no husband, no children, no stake in the future. You are just a single woman with a grudge because she wasn't invited to the party. Is that why you created the conduct clause to punish me for being single? We created it to protect the fund from people who are erratic," she said. "People who stalk family members in parking lots. People who send threatening legal letters. You are proving our point every day." I took a breath. I kept my voice steady, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. "Did you borrow from the fund? Carol, did you take a personal loan disguised as a program expense?" She laughed. It was a cold, dismissive sound. "You are emotional. Leah, you are seeing ghosts. There is no loan. There is only complex portfolio management that you do not understand. Answer the question." "I don't have to answer you." She spat. "I am the trustee. You are a beneficiary. You exist because we allow it. If you attack the fund, you are attacking us. You are attacking your mother. You are attacking your grandmother's care. Do you want to be the one who cuts off Evelyn's nursing staff? Because that is what will happen if you freeze the accounts." There it was, the ultimate shield. She was holding Grandma hostage. I stood up. "I am not attacking the family. Carol, I am attacking the parasite that is feeding on it." Carol stood up too, smoothing her coat. "The meeting is on Friday," she said. "If you show up, we will vote to remove you. We have the cause. We have the votes. Go home. Leah, take the loss. It is better than the alternative." She turned and walked out, leaving her sparkling water untouched. I sat there for a long time, watching the condensation bead on her glass. She was terrified. I could see it in the tightness of her jaw, the way she rushed her threats. She knew I was close, but she was right about one thing. If I blew it up, the freeze would hurt everyone, including Grandma. I needed to be surgically precise. I left the bakery and drove aimlessly for a while, ending up back at my grandmother's house. I didn't know why. I just felt drawn there. The house was empty again. Patty, the assistant, must have gone home. Grandma was napping in her chair in the living room, the television playing a game show at low volume. I walked into the library, the room where I had found the draft amendment. I sat at Grandpa's desk. I ran my hand over the leather surface. Silas Parker. He was a hard man, but he was fair. He wouldn't have wanted this. He wouldn't have wanted his legacy to be a slush fund for his daughter's vanity projects. I opened the drawers again, aimlessly shifting the junk. My hand brushed against the underside of the central drawer. I felt something. A piece of tape. I frowned. I crouched down and looked up under the drawer mechanism. There was an envelope taped to the bottom of the drawer. I peeled it off. It was dusty, the tape yellow and brittle. The front of the envelope had my name on it. To Leah. If anything feels wrong. My breath hitched. I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was shaky, written with a heavy hand. It must have been from the very end. When the cancer was taking his strength, I sat in the chair, the envelope trembling in my hands. He had left this for me. Specifically for me, not for Carol, not for Gordon. He knew. Even back then. He must have known that I would be the one to look, the one who wouldn't just sign the paper. I slid my finger under the flap and broke the seal. The envelope in my hands felt heavy, though it contained only a single sheet of paper. The adhesive on the flap had yellowed and dried, brittle to the touch, and when I slid my finger under it, the seal gave way with a soft, tearing sound that seemed too loud in the quiet of the library. I pulled out the letter. The paper was high-quality cotton bond, the kind my grandfather used to order from a stationer in Richmond. I unfolded it, my fingers trembling slightly. The handwriting was unmistakable, sharp, angular, and pressed hard into the page, even though the ink was slightly faded. To Leah, if you are reading this, I am gone, and you have gone looking for answers. I always knew you would be the one. You have your grandmother's heart, but you have my eyes. You see the cracks in the wall before anyone else notices the draft. I built this fund to hold us together. But money is a strange solvent. It can glue a family together or dissolve the bonds entirely. There are those in this house who value appearance over fairness. They believe that peace is the same thing as silence. It is not. Do not trust the copies they give you. Do not trust the summaries. I have left the original, notarized trust deed and bylaws in safety deposit box number 412 at the Fox Ridge Community Bank. The key is taped to the back of the portrait of the ship in the hallway. Use it. Trust your gut. Leah, and forgive them, if you can, but do not let them rewrite the truth. Love, Grandfather. I sat there for a long time, staring at the words, appearance over fairness. It was the most accurate diagnosis of the Parker family pathology I had ever read. Carol didn't care about being good. She cared about looking good. Sandra didn't care about being safe. She cared about feeling safe, and the fund was the stage where they performed their respective plays. I stood up, my legs feeling steadier than they had in days. I walked into the hallway. The portrait was there, a large oil painting of the Lady Evelyn, the first cargo ship Silas Parker had ever purchased. I lifted the heavy frame away from the wall. There, taped to the paper backing with a strip of masking tape, was a small brass key. I peeled it off. It was cool against my palm. I put the letter in my purse, next to the phone that was recording everything, and walked out of the house. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. There was no one left in that house who would tell me the truth anyway. Fox Ridge Community Bank was a relic of a different era, a building made of red brick and white columns that looked more like a courthouse than a financial institution. The air inside smelled of stale coffee and money. I walked to the front desk, my heels clicking on the marble floor. I need to access box 412. I said to the clerk, placing the key on the counter. She looked at the key, then at me. Do you have authorization on the account? My name is Leah Parker. I believe my grandfather, Silas Parker, listed me as a signatory. She typed into her computer. The keystroke slow and deliberate. Let me check. I held my breath. If Carol had removed me from the box access, this trail ended here. She frowned at the screen. Silas Parker. Yes, access is granted to the grantor and Leah Parker. She looked up. Can I see some ID? I handed her my driver's license. She checked it, nodded, and buzzed me through the heavy metal gate. Down in the vault. The air was cooler. The clerk used her master key. Then I inserted the brass key. The lock turned with a satisfying, heavy thunk. She slid the long metal box out and carried it to a private viewing room. I will give you some privacy, she said, closing the door behind her. I opened the lid. Inside, there were no jewels, no stacks of cash, just a thick, bound document with a blue cover. The Parker family. Irrevocable trust. Governance and bylaws. I opened it. I turned past the preamble, past the definitions of assets. I went straight to the section on amendments. Article 7. Section 3. Amendment Protocol. Any amendment to the governing bylaws of this trust requires a unanimous vote of the Board of Trustees. Furthermore, written notice of any proposed amendment must be sent via certified mail to all beneficiaries no less than 30 days prior to the vote. Failure to provide such notice renders the amendment null and void. I read it again. Certified mail. 30 days. Null and void. I closed my eyes and exhaled. A long, shuddering breath. I had never received a certified letter. I had never received a notice. The conduct clause that they were using to threaten me, it wasn't just unfair. It was illegal. It was void. I turned to the section on beneficiary rights. Article 4 Beneficiary Standing. All direct lineal descendants of the grantor shall be considered voting beneficiaries upon reaching the age of 25. No trustee shall have the authority to suspend, revoke, or alter the voting rights of a beneficiary without a judicial order finding said beneficiary mentally incompetent. Non-voting beneficiary, the term the staffer had used, it didn't exist. They had invented it. They had lied to the administrators, or the administrators were lying for them. I took out my phone and photographed every single page of the document. I focused on the signatures at the bottom, Silas Parker, Mr. Henderson, and the notary. I focused on the dates. I focused on the specific clauses that dismantled every lie Carol had told me in the last week. I put the document back in the box. I wasn't going to take it. If I took it, they could claim I tampered with it. I left it there. In the vault, a pristine, untouchable truth that they couldn't shred. I walked out of the bank and into the bright sunlight of the Fox Ridge afternoon. I felt lighter. I felt dangerous. I called Jenna. I found it. I said, "The original bylaws." "Yes. And Jenna, they are cooked. Tell me," she said. "They have to send certified notice for any amendment. 30 days in advance. If they don't, it is void." Jenna let out a low whistle. "That is the kill shot. Leah, that is procedural noncompliance. It doesn't matter what the amendment says. If they didn't mail it, it doesn't exist. And there is more." I said, "They can't remove my voting rights without a judge declaring me incompetent, which is why they are building the narrative that you are unstable." Jenna realized. They are trying to build a case for incompetence. That is why the parking lot, the confrontation, the emotional emails, it is all evidence building. Exactly. "Okay," Jenna said, her voice shifting into lawyer mode. "We need to build the packet. We are not just going to the meeting to talk. We are going to the meeting to drop a bomb." I spent the rest of the afternoon in my motel room, my laptop open, creating the document that would end the war. We called it the Parker Governance Review. It sounded boring. It was actually an indictment. Exhibit A, the timeline. I listed every amendment date alongside the conflicting travel records of the trustees. Exhibit B, the conflict. I laid out the financial relationship between Stonebridge Wealth Strategies and Harrow and Crestfield. Exhibit C, the missing notices. I included a sworn affidavit that I drafted myself, stating I had never received certified mail regarding any amendment. Exhibit D, the money. The tax record showing $400,000 moving to Whitmore Heritage Ventures. Exhibit E, the conspiracy. The screenshots from the group chat. When we finished, the PDF was 40 pages long. I was just about to hit save when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Carol. "Leah, the family is gathering at my house tonight for a pre-meeting dinner. Just a quiet meal. We think it is important we all get on the same page before the official business tomorrow. 7 o'clock. Please come." I stared at the screen. A quiet meal. It was a trap. I knew it was a trap. They wanted to get me in a room, without lawyers, without witnesses, and break me down. They wanted to scare me into signing something, or provoke me into a reaction they could record. I forwarded the text to Jenna. "Don't go," she replied. "I have to." I typed back, "If I don't go, they will say I am refusing to engage. They will say I am isolating myself. I need to look reasonable. Then I'm coming with you." Jenna texted, "You can't. If I bring a lawyer, they will shut down. They won't talk." "Then put me in your ear," she said. "Wear your hair down. Put in an AirPod. Keep the line open. I will mute myself. I will be your witness. I arrived at Carol's house at 7 sharp. It was a sprawling colonial estate on the edge of the golf course, manicured to within an inch of its life. The windows glowed with warm, golden light, presenting a tableau of domestic perfection. I parked my sedan next to Ethan's SUV. I checked my appearance in the mirror. Navy dress, simple makeup, hair down, covering my ears. I put the left earbud in and tapped it. "Jenna," I whispered, "I am here." Jenna's voice came through. "Clear and steady. I am recording. You are not alone." I took a deep breath and walked to the front door. Carol opened it before I could knock. She was wearing a silk blouse and holding a glass of wine. "Leah," she exclaimed, pulling me into a stiff hug. "I am so glad you came." She smelled of expensive perfume and Chardonnay. "Hello, Carol," I said, stepping back. "Thank you for the invitation. Come in. Come in." Everyone is in the sunroom. Everyone meant the core group. Sandra, Gordon, Ethan. They were sitting in a semicircle of plush armchairs. My mother was clutching a throw pillow like a shield. Gordon was staring into his drink. Ethan was standing by the fireplace, looking like a man who was ready to sell a timeshare. "Leah," Ethan said, nodding. "Glad you could make it." I sat in the empty chair they had left for me. It was positioned in the center. Facing them, the Inquisition seat. "So," Carol said, sitting down and crossing her legs, "we wanted to have this time to just talk. Family to family. No lawyers. No administrators. Just us." I nodded. "That sounds nice." "Leah," Sandra spoke up, her voice trembling. "We are all just so worried about you. You seem so angry lately. All these emails. The demands. It is not like you. I am not angry." "Mom," I said calmly, "I am just informed. Informed of what Ethan asked," his tone sharp. "Conspiracy theories. Informed of the bylaws." I said, "and the fact that I haven't been receiving the notices I am legally entitled to." Carol sighed, a long theatrical sound of exhaustion. "See, this is what I mean. You are fixated on the bureaucracy. You are missing the heart of the matter." "And what is the heart of the matter?" I asked. "The heart is that this family is under attack," Carol said, her voice dropping. "The world is changing. Leah, the markets are volatile. We have enemies, people who would love to see the Parker name dragged through the mud. We have to close ranks. We have to protect the assets." "By moving $400,000 to your vacation home renovation?" I asked. The room went deadly silent. Jenna's voice whispered in my ear. "Stay calm. Let them speak." Ethan stepped forward. "That is a malicious interpretation of a strategic community investment. It is a fact." "Ethan, stop it!" Sandra cried out. We all turned to her. My mother was weeping, tears streaming down her face. "Stop it, Leah. Please, you are going to ruin everything, Mom. I am trying to protect you." I said gently, "No, you are not. You are making it worse." Sandra sobbed. Carol promised. She promised that if we just stayed quiet, if we just let her handle the restructuring, no one would get hurt. She said the debt would be covered. She said we would be safe. I looked at Carol. She was glaring at my mother with pure venom. "What debt?" "Mom," I asked. "The debt from the business," Sandra wailed. "We owed so much money." Gordon signed the papers. But I knew we were taking it from the trust, and Carol said we had to pay it back before the auditors found out. "That is why the distributions stopped. That is why we can't let you see the books." Sandra, Carol snapped. "Be quiet. You are hysterical." I looked at Gordon. He was gray-faced. "It is true, isn't it?" I asked. "The fund isn't just modernizing, it is recovering. You drained it to save the logistics company. And now you are scrambling to fill the hole before the next regulatory audit." Gordon looked up, his eyes wet. "It wasn't just the payroll. Leah, it was a lot. The advance. It was almost $2 million. Jenna gasped in my ear. $2 million? That is a felony. $2 million, I repeated. And the $400,000 to Whitmore Ventures. That was to hide the transfer. Gordon whispered, We moved money between entities to make the balance sheet look solvent for the quarterly review. It was creative accounting. It was money laundering. I said. Ethan slammed his hand on the mantelpiece. It was survival. You sit there in your little consulting job, judging us. You have no idea what it takes to maintain this lifestyle. The clubs, the houses, the reputation, it costs a fortune. Leah. And Grandpa left us with a business that was bleeding cash. We fixed it. We did what we had to do. You stole from the beneficiaries to pay for your own mismanagement. I said, You are a beneficiary, Ethan shouted. We saved your inheritance. If the company had gone under, the Parker name would be worthless. You would be nobody. I would rather be nobody than a thief, I said quietly. Ethan laughed. A harsh, barking sound. Oh, spare us the morality play. You have always been different. Leah, you don't fit in. You don't understand what we maintain here. You think this is just about money. It is about power. It is about influence in this town. We are the Parkers. That means something. You mean what you control. I said. Carol stood up. The charm was gone. The mask was off. She looked like a predator. You are right. Leah, she said, her voice ice cold. It is about control, and we have it. You have nothing. You have a few stolen documents and a paranoid imagination. Tomorrow morning, at the meeting, we are going to vote to remove you. We will cite your mother's testimony that you are harassing her. We will cite Gordon's testimony that you threatened him, and the administrators will back us up because they know who signs their checks. You can't remove me. I said, the conduct clause is void. You never sent the notice. Carol smiled. It was a terrifying smile. Oh, honey, do you really think we didn't think of that? We have the certified mail receipts. We have your signature on the return card. I froze. I never signed anything. Really? Carol asked, raising an eyebrow. Because I have a card right here in my safe that says you did. It is amazing what you can do when you have a family member who is good at penmanship. She looked at Ethan. Ethan looked down, smirking. They had forged my signature on the certified mail receipt. They had created a fake paper trail to cover their tracks. Jenna's voice in my ear was urgent. Get out, now. They are admitting to forgery. You have what you need. I stood up. My knees were shaking, but I kept my face impassive. You are right. Carol, I said, I don't fit in here. I walked toward the door. Leah Sandra called out, Please, just sign the waiver. Just let it go. We can be a family again. I didn't look back. I walked out the front door, down the perfectly manicured path, and got into my car. As soon as I closed the door, I ripped the earbud out. Did you get that? I asked the phone. I got it, Jenna said. I got all of it. The $2 million, the forgery admission, the money laundering. Leah, this isn't a civil suit anymore. This is RICO. I drove back to the motel in a daze. The adrenaline was crashing, leaving me shivering. When I got into the room, the red light on the motel room phone was blinking. I picked up the receiver. You have one new message. I pressed play. Ms. Parker, this is James Sterling from Harrow and Crestfield. Regarding the meeting tomorrow, please be advised that attendance is mandatory. We have received reports of disruptive behavior on your part. Any attempt to interrupt the proceedings or present unauthorized documentation will result in your immediate removal from the premises and a vote for removal for cause from the trust. We expect your full cooperation. The administrator, he was threatening me. Removal for cause. He was using the exact language Carol had used. They were all in on it. The bank, the investment firm, the family. It was a closed loop. I sat on the edge of the bed. They expected me to be scared. They expected me to shrink away, to take a payoff, to disappear. But they had forgotten one thing. I was Silas Parker's granddaughter, and I had the original bylaws, and I had a recording of them confessing to a felony. I wasn't going to survive the meeting. I was going to commandeer it. I opened my laptop. I pulled up the email draft to the entire board of trustees and the administrative team. I typed, Subject Trustee Refresh Meeting, Agenda Addendum to the Board of Trustees and Harrow Crestfield Administration. I am in receipt of your voicemail. I will attend the meeting tomorrow as scheduled. I will speak once. I will provide documents that clarify the governance history of this fund. I suggest that all parties bring legal counsel, as the matters discussed will concern the validity of all amendments filed since 2010, and the authorization of disbursements totaling in excess of $2 million. See you at 9. Leah Parker. I hit send. Then I called Jenna. Jenna, I said, don't sleep. We have to prepare the final packet, and I need you to find me a printer that can handle legal-size paper at 3 in the morning. Why, Jenna asked. Because I'm going to print copies for everyone. I said, I want them to hold their crimes in their hands while I read them out loud. The conference room at Harrow and Crestfield was designed to make people feel small. It was a cavern of glass and polished mahogany, situated on the 3rd floor of their Fox Ridge office. Overlooking the town square, the air conditioning was set to a temperature that felt less like climate control and more like cryopreservation. I arrived 20 minutes early. I wore a charcoal gray suit that I usually reserved for firing people or negotiating severance packages. My hair was pulled back into a severe bun, and I carried nothing but a single, thick black binder and a porcelain travel mug of black coffee. The receptionist, the same young woman who had been so flustered a few days prior, didn't even make eye contact as she buzzed me in. She just pressed the button under her desk and looked at her phone. I walked into the conference room and took the seat at the head of the table. Usually, this seat was reserved for the chairman or the lead trustee, which meant Carol, but I took it. It was a small act of territorial aggression, but it felt necessary. I placed the binder on the table. I opened it to the first tab. 5 minutes later, the door opened. Carol walked in first. Flanked by Ethan, they were mid-conversation, laughing about something involving a golf handicap. They stopped dead when they saw me. Leah, Carol said, her smile tight and brittle. You are early, and you are in my seat. I didn't move. I didn't smile. I prefer the view from here. Carol, I said. Ethan scoffed, walking around the table to take a seat on the right. Whatever. Let's just get this over with. I have a tea time at 1. Gordon and Sandra trailed in behind them. My mother looked like she hadn't slept in a week. Her eyes were puffy, and she was clutching her purse like a life preserver. Gordon looked gray, his gaze fixed firmly on the carpet. They sat on the left side, opposite Ethan. Finally, Mr. Sterling, the senior administrator from Harrow and Crestfield, entered. He was a man in his 60s with a silver comb-over and a suit that cost more than my car. He carried a stack of files and looked at me with open disdain. Ms. Parker, he said, nodding curtly. I trust we will not have any disruptions today. I opened my travel mug and took a sip. That depends on the agenda. Mr. Sterling. He ignored me and sat at the opposite end of the table. Let us call the meeting to order, Sterling said. We are here to review the annual performance of the Parker Family Fund and to vote on several key governance amendments proposed by the Board of Trustees. Carol cleared her throat. She stood up. Even though everyone else was sitting, it was a power move she had perfected years ago. Thank you. James, she said, beaming at the room. Before we dive into the numbers, I just want to say a few words about unity. We have faced some challenges this year. The market has been unpredictable, and we have had some internal friction regarding the direction of the fund. But I want to remind everyone that our primary goal is risk management. We have to protect the legacy against threats, both external and internal. She looked directly at me. We have had some behavior recently that has been concerning. She continued, erratic demands, aggressive communication, stalking of family members. This kind of instability poses a reputational risk to the fund. Therefore, the board has drafted a motion to place temporary restrictions on beneficiary access for any individual who demonstrates such conduct. Here, Ethan muttered, tapping his pen on the table. We need to vote on this amendment immediately, Carol said, to ensure the safety of the assets. I waited. I let the silence stretch for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, then I spoke. Before we vote, I said, my voice calm and projecting to the back of the room, I would like to enter some documents into the record. Sterling sighed. Ms. Parker, this is a board meeting. Beneficiaries are here as observers. You do not have the floor to submit agenda items. I am not submitting an agenda item. Mr. Sterling, I am submitting evidence of procedural noncompliance that invalidates this entire meeting. I opened my binder. I took out the first document, the photograph of the original trust deed, from the safety deposit box. I slid it down the long mahogany table. It spun and came to a rest in front of Sterling. This is the original trust deed, signed by Silas Parker in 2010. I said, "Please turn to Article 7, Section 3. Sterling looked at the paper. He didn't pick it up. "I am familiar with the deed," he said dismissively. "Then you are familiar with the requirement that any amendment to the bylaws requires certified notice sent to all beneficiaries 30 days prior to a vote." I said, "And that failure to provide such notice renders the amendment null and void." Carol let out a sharp laugh. "We sent the notices. Leah, we have the receipts. We discussed this last night. You really need to stop lying." I pulled out the next document. It was a sworn affidavit I had signed that morning in front of a notary. "This is an affidavit stating under penalty of perjury that I never received notice." I said, "And since you claim to have a receipt with my signature on it, I have also included a forensic handwriting analysis of my signature versus the one on your receipt." I slid the second document down the table. Carol froze. She hadn't expected me to have a forensic analysis. She hadn't expected me to call the bluff so fast. "Furthermore," I continued, looking at Ethan, "I have compiled a timeline of the amendment filings." I took out a large, fold-out chart and spread it on the table. It showed the dates of the amendments in red and the location of the trustees in blue. On February 12, 2021, the board supposedly met in Fox Ridge to remove the audit requirement, I said, pointing to the date. "But according to your own social media posts, you were all in Cabo San Lucas, unless you flew the notary down to Mexico. That document is a forgery." Gordon made a small, whimpering sound. He put his head in his hands. "This is ridiculous," Ethan snapped, his face flushing red. "You are stalking our Instagrams now. That proves nothing. We could have signed it before we left." "Then why is it dated the 12th, I asked. "Notarization requires the physical presence of the signer on the date of the signature. That is the law." "Ethan, you know that. You work in finance." I turned to Sterling. "And speaking of finance, Mr. Sterling, I would like to discuss the relationship between Harrow and Crestfield and Stonebridge Wealth Strategies." Sterling stiffened. "That is a standard vendor relationship, is it?" I asked. I pulled out the spreadsheet Jenna and I had built. "Here is a correlation analysis." I said, "Every time the fund executes a transaction that restricts beneficiary rights or moves capital into a private holding, Stonebridge receives a consulting fee increase." I pointed to the spike in 2023. Here, in June 2023, the fund transferred $400,000 to Whitmore Heritage Ventures. 2 weeks later, Stonebridge received a $30,000 performance bonus from Harrow and Crestfield. I looked at Ethan. "That looks a lot like a kickback." Ethan stood up so fast his chair tipped over. "You are crazy. You are accusing me of federal crimes in a board meeting. This is slander. It is only slander if it is not true." I said quietly. I turned to my mother. Sandra was shaking, her hands over her mouth. "Mom," I said gently, Tell them about the $400,000. Sandra looked at me, her eyes wide with terror. Then she looked at Carol. Carol was staring at her with a look of pure, concentrated rage. "Don't you dare!" "Sandra," Carol hissed. "He said it was for the legacy." Sandra whispered, "What was for the legacy?" "Mom," I asked. "The money." She sobbed. "The $400,000. It wasn't for a program. It was to pay back the loan. The loan Gordon took to save the company." Gordon looked up. His face was wet with tears. "We didn't mean to." He choked out. The payroll was due. We took it. We thought we could put it back, but the business kept losing money. So Carol said we could move the debt. Move it where I asked. To the foundation. Gordon said, "Whitmore Heritage Ventures." She said if we moved the money there as a grant, it would balance the books for the fund. It would look like an expense, not a loss. I looked at Sterling. He was pale. He was sweating. "So," I said, addressing the room, "you embezzled $2 million to save a failing logistics company, then, to hide the hole in the balance sheet. You created a fake grant to Carol's Vanity Foundation, and when I started asking questions, you decided to label me unstable and remove me so I wouldn't find the audit trail." The room was silent. The only sound was the hum of the air conditioning and my mother's quiet sobbing. This wasn't a family meeting anymore. It was a crime scene. Mr. Sterling stood up. He gathered his files, his hands shaking slightly. "I think we need to recess," he stammered. This creates a significant conflict. Harrow and Crestfield cannot be party to disputes of this nature. Sit down." "James," Carol barked. He didn't sit. He looked at the door. "Ms. Parker is disrupting the proceedings," he shouted, pointing at me. "She is introducing unauthorized materials. I'm calling security to have her removed." I didn't move. I looked him dead in the eye. "Go ahead." "Mr. Sterling," I said, "call security. But before you do, I want you to confirm on the record that you refused to provide me with the bylaws when I asked for them last week." Sterling froze. "Confirm it." I said, "You sent me a letter stating they were restricted. If you remove me now, after I have presented evidence of fraud, that refusal becomes proof of your complicity. You are not just an administrator anymore. James, you are a co-conspirator." He sat down heavily. He knew I was right. If he kicked me out now, he was obstructing justice. Carol looked around the room. She saw Ethan pacing nervously. She saw Gordon weeping. She saw Sandra broken. She realized she had lost the room. But Carol was not a woman who surrendered. She pivoted. She looked at me, her expression shifting from rage to a deep, sorrowful disappointment. "You know, Leah," she said softly, "I actually feel sorry for you." I raised an eyebrow. "Do you?" "Yes," she said, "because you are so damaged. You are so desperate to be right that you are willing to destroy your own family." She gestured to Gordon and Sandra. "Look at them," she said. "Look at your mother. She is terrified, not because of the money, but because her own daughter is interrogating her like a criminal. We did what we had to do to save this family from ruin. We carried the burden. We made the hard choices while you were off playing consultant in your safe little life." She leaned forward, her voice trembling with faux emotion. "We are grieving. Leah, we are still grieving your grandfather, and you are weaponizing that grief. You are twisting our intentions to make yourself the victim. It is sick. It was a good speech. It was the kind of speech that usually worked. It played on guilt, on shared history, on the idea that family loyalty superseded the law." I looked at her. I thought about the group chat. I thought about the no drama label. I thought about the pinned message telling them to treat me as unstable. "If it was honest, Carol," I said, my voice cutting through the air like a scalpel. "You wouldn't need a secret chat to do it." Carol flinched. It was a physical reaction, as if I had slapped her. I reached into my binder and pulled out the last document, the screenshots. I slid them across the table. Parker core thread. I read aloud. "Finalize language before Leah sees it. If she pushes, remind her she is unstable." I looked at Ethan. Is that grief? Ethan? Or is that strategy? Ethan looked away. I stood up. "I am not the one destroying this family." I said, "You did that when you decided that your reputation was worth more than the truth." I turned to Sterling. "I want a full forensic audit of the fund, dating back to 2010. I want an independent trustee appointed immediately, and I want the resignation of the current board of trustees pending the investigation." Sterling looked at Carol. Carol looked at the table. "I will have to consult with legal," Sterling said weakly. "Do that," I said. I started to pack up my binder. I felt a strange sense of calm. It was over. I had dropped the bomb. I had exposed the rot. But just as I was zipping up the binder, Sterling cleared his throat. "There is one more thing. Ms. Parker." I stopped. What Sterling looked at his papers, shuffling them nervously, "regarding your request for a forensic audit, And the liquidity. What about it? I asked. The fund's liquid reserves are currently constrained, he said. Constrained, I repeated. What does that mean? It means, Carol said, her voice hollow, that there is no money to audit. Leah. I looked at her. What did you do? We moved it, she said. Last night, after we heard you were bringing a lawyer. We initiated a defensive transfer to an offshore holding trust to protect the assets from litigation. I stared at her. You moved the remaining capital offshore. It is standard procedure during a dispute, Ethan chimed in, though he looked sick, to prevent a freeze, but the transfer takes time to clear. Sterling added quickly, and given the allegations raised today, the bank has flagged the transaction. Flagged it, I asked. The funds are frozen, Sterling said. Not by us, by the regulators. The transaction triggered an automatic money laundering review because of the irregular destination. I looked at the table. So the money is gone. I said, It is not gone, Carol said. Trying to regain some dignity, it is just inaccessible. Until the review is complete. And how long does a review take? I asked Sterling. 6 months, he said. Maybe a year, maybe longer. If there are criminal charges. I looked at my mother. She was staring at the wall. Catatonic. I looked at Gordon. He was weeping silently. I looked at Carol. She sat there, chin high, ruling over a kingdom of ash. They had destroyed it. In their attempt to save it from me, they had triggered the very thing they feared most. The regulators were involved. The accounts were frozen. The reputation they had fought so hard to protect was about to be obliterated by a federal investigation. I picked up my binder. I walked to the door. Where are you going? Ethan called out. Panic in his voice. We have to fix this. We have to present a united front to the regulators. I stopped with my hand on the doorknob. I looked back at them. They looked small. They looked trapped. I am not part of this we anymore. Ethan, I said, but you are a beneficiary, Carol shouted. If the money is frozen, you get nothing, you lose too. I looked at her one last time. I realized she was right. I wouldn't get the money. The lawyers would take it all. The fines would eat the rest. The Parker family fund was dead. But I had something they didn't. I had the truth. And I had the exit. I didn't lose. Carol, I said, I just stopped playing. I opened the door and walked out. I walked past the receptionist. I walked down the stairs. I walked out into the blinding sunlight of the Fox Ridge Square. I took out my phone. I deleted the screenshot of the group chat. I didn't need it anymore. I walked to my car, got in, and drove toward the highway. I didn't look back at the office building. I didn't look back at the town. I turned on the radio. It was just white noise, but it sounded like music. I was broke. I was alone. My family was imploding. But for the first time in 33 years, I was free. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It was a long journey for Leah, and I hope you felt every twist and turn of her fight for the truth. I would love to know where you are listening from. Please drop your country or city in the comments below. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. And if you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories and hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. Let me know in the comments. Do you think Leah made the right choice by walking away, or should she have stayed to fight for the money? I can't wait to hear your thoughts. Until next time.